The Last of Us didn't just succeed commercially with all its versions across platforms. It became something much bigger. It connected with players on a deeper level, making us bond with two people we didn't even know existed, becoming a true masterpiece of storytelling. The game dominated conversations for years, particularly around its unforgettable final scene, where Joel kept Ellie from the hard and dirty truth, not that the Fireflies didn't need her anymore, but that he did. He was not willing to lose her to anyone. He would burn the whole world for that little girl he just began to love. This moment sparked unending debates on the internet. Should you sacrifice someone you love to save humanity, or sacrifice the world to save her? And I've always adored open-ended narratives. They elevate storytelling by inviting interpretation and fostering rich discussions. But with the release of Part 2 and the HBO series, I felt like the narrative shifted. Instead of honoring the first game's masterfully subjective ending, and maybe exploring other stories and debates, I felt like the sequel chose to dissect every single consequence of Joel's decision, framing it as if he deserved everything he got. And in this second season, everyone acted like he did something unforgivable.
Did you do something to her?
While I never believed Joel's choice was unquestionably right, I detested how the franchise abandoned all the gray areas that would make his choice justified and reduced his complexity to a caricature of selfishness and sorrowness. Like, how dare you save a defenseless girl? What a monster! And the way they killed him. I'm not just talking about the brutal death scene, but the way he was portrayed in the second game. He was unrecognizable. Like, yeah, let's go to your armed unknown friends camp. What could possibly go wrong? So since Neil Druckmann went to such lengths to debate why Abby had a reason to do what she did, and to explain that Joel wasn't a hero because he did bad things, today, I'm reclaiming the conversation. I'll argue why Joel's decision wasn't just defensible, but the only morally coherent and logical choice someone in their sane mind could possibly make. The series opens with a chilling interview featuring a mycologist who explains that fungus infection spreads through the bloodstream.
There's a fungus that infects insects, gets inside an ant, for example, travels through its circulatory system to the ant's brain and then floods it with hallucinogen.
If the fungus travels via blood, wouldn't Ellie's immunity be tied to her entire biology and not just to her brain? Matt, from Game Theory, brilliantly dissected this subject in his video, proposing that Ellie's immunity comes not from eradicating the fungus in her body, but from an inactive variant already in her brain, preventing the real cordyceps to settle in. So maybe infecting someone else's brain with it would prevent this person from ever turning into a zombie. It might be easy with it circulating in her bloodstream, but in the same interview, the expert drops another bomb.
And there are no treatments for this, no preventatives, no cures. They don't exist. It's not even possible to make them.
This throws the Firefly's entire mission to the ground. If modern science, with all its labs and funding, can't crack this, how could a ragtag militia in a collapsing hospital? So there's no cure. Every time you hear someone saying that, remember, it's a lie. The only thing that could possibly be made was prevention. If you got Ellie's variant in your brain, you would not turn. But there would be no way to turn people back.
Hell, you mean surgery?
The doctors tell me the cordyceps, the growth inside her, has somehow mutated. It's why she's immune. Once they remove it, they'll be able to reverse engineer a vaccine. A vaccine.
For this video's sake, let's play by the first game's rules. We are going to assume the cure is feasible, requiring the lethal extraction of Ellie's variant cordyceps located in her brain and reverse engineering it to create a vaccine. Vaccines demand two things: stable energy and cold chain storage. The Firefly's hospital, however, can barely keep its flickering lights on. Modern mRNA vaccines, like Pfizer's COVID-19 shot, require storage at -70 degrees Celsius. During the pandemic, African nations like Malawi and South Sudan struggled to distribute doses due to broken cold chains, even with international aid. Some nations had to return expired vaccines. These countries lacked generators and reliable electricity. Now, try imagining the Fireflies, relying on old generators in a building held together by duct tape. Does that sound believable to you? 'Cause it doesn't for me. But let's grant a miracle. Suppose their fictional vaccine only needs standard refrigeration. That would be between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius. Even then, how would they transport it? The game's world is a graveyard of blocked roads, collapsed bridges, and cities ruled by factions like the Hunters, Seraphites, and also infected. Take Mozambique. Insurgents burned clinics, looted supplies, and shot healthcare workers. Would the Fireflies, a faction known for bombing quarantine zones, suddenly turn into altruistic militia, braving hordes of infected and hostile factions to hand out cures? That's very unlikely. But, okay, let's say they managed to distribute it. Who'd control access? I don't think they would just give it away. During the 1976 swine flu outbreak, wealthy nations bought up almost all doses, leaving poorer countries empty-handed. The Fireflies, in the middle of a bloody war with the government and Hunters, would surely prioritize their own. Imagine Fedra soldiers storming their labs, triggering a firefight that destroys the vaccine stockpile. The Last of Us multiplayer illustrated this relationship very well. There was even a mode called Interrogation, where you had to interrogate your enemies to discover where their supplies safe are hidden, and then steal it. I don't think the Hunters are getting the right shot from the Fireflies, but even with the stars aligned, granting all these miracles, their cure could still be deadly. Real vaccines actually require years of tests. I don't think they have the required equipments to create and test a cure, and I can't remember it ever being shown. In the 1950s, thalidomide, a drug marketed as safe tranquilizer, caused a whole generation to be born with phocomelia, a condition that prevents your limbs from growing. Imagine the last generation of humans being born with shortened limbs. Without proper testing, the Fireflies' gamble could have birthed a pandemic even worse than cordyceps. But logistics aside, here is the real reason why Joel was right. In the first game, Ellie said,
"Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you."
Ellie's greatest fear wasn't dying meaningless. It was being alone. When Joel tries to leave her with Tommy, that's pure terror. No one is allowed to care for her more than Joel. It becomes clear that Ellie's desire for a meaningful death was less about heroism and more about existential despair. Depression and suicidal thoughts aren't rare in teens her age, especially in a world like that. Ellie was seeking worth, a worth that Marlene refused to give beyond being a possible cure for humanity. A worth she found in Joel. A traumatized 14-year-old orphaned kid cannot consent to suicide by surgery. Even if she'd written, "I agree" on a scrap of paper, it would still be abuse masked as choice. A bunch of grown people trying to use her body for their own benefit, saying that a coma-inducted child would want to die for them? I don't buy it. What Joel did was monstrous. Killing medics, lying to Ellie. But let's flip the script. Would that surgeon, scalpel in hand, sacrifice his own child for the greater good? Would Abby's father have slit her head open to save Joel? I really don't think so. The real cure Ellie carried wasn't in her brain. Through her, Joel rediscovered love, purpose, and the will to live beyond bare survival. I think Jackson illustrates this concept very well. A community thriving not through miracles, but cooperation and hard work. I love to see the scene where a horde of infected invaded the city, tearing down the walls. People there didn't flee. They stood tall, willing to give their life to fight for others. They expected no miraculous cure but companionship. The original game's message wasn't about saving humanity. It was about saving humanity, our humanity, especially in a world that rewards cruelty. Joel's choice wasn't selfish. He chose not to abandon a defenseless child. If we're condemning him, we must also condemn the Fireflies for weaponizing a child's trauma. So yes, Joel was right. Not because his hands are clean, but because in a world stripped of mercy, choosing love, flawed, messy, complex, but also beautiful and recomforting love, is the only thing that matters.
If somehow the Lord gave me a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again.
Thank you so much for watching this far. Consider to like and subscribe. Also, I would love to hear your opinions about this video, so feel free to drop a comment.